How to be perfect. Sokuzan suggested that title, that topic, because she wanted me to know how to be perfect. And she knew that I listened to my Dharma talks, and that's how I know about it. So I'm about to give that talk. I also have no idea what I'm going to say. Do you? I don't know. But at one time or another, we all have that kind of a grasping or desire to want things to be different than they are. This is what basically the Buddha's teachings are based on. Suffering, seeing that there's suffering everywhere. He saw there was suffering. Found the cause was wanting things to be different than they are, or desire, wanting something else. More of this, less of that. More, less. Or else, take it out of here, shut it off, let me distract myself. So we're always negotiating with ourselves, with others. It's a constant chatter going on. And you may have that chatter running in your consciousness in such a way that it's not too problematic, because maybe you've made a little hideout somewhere, a little home. Not accusing you of anything. I don't know what you're up to. Barely know what I'm up to. But we'd really like to know that, if you could just, how to get exactly what you want, how to be perfect. Let's have the fruition of this whole thing. I'm tired of this running in circles and saying, you're going to get there, you're going to get there, you're going to get there. It'll work, keep going. So it seems that our job, task, project about that is wanting things to be different than they are, or wanting to be perfect, wanting everything to be perfect. In order to really approach that in a genuine way, seems to require us to really look at all the imperfections and not look at them with a view to correct them. This is a misunderstanding. It is that misunderstanding ties into relative truth, the relative truth that the Buddha pointed out when we talk about karma or cause and effect, samsara, the constant wheel of life and death and life. The biggest rotation we all know about that we shut down on is life and death. That's the big deal there. All of these causes and conditions that have arisen as a solid, so-called solid, apparently, I'm here, you're over there kind of feeling. I'm here, there's the door, I can leave whenever I want. The sun come out today, maybe not tomorrow. And we just kind of navigate, negotiate. We're very lucky, as I'm sure most of you realize, to not be born in Syria or in someplace in Africa. If you look at some of those videos, those are living beings. They're all over the place. There's billions of them. We're one of them. We're one of billions. The ancient metaphor for that was sometimes used, the sands of the Ganges River. It's like even Trungpa Rinpoche, my first teacher, talked about being like a grain of sand. Is to have an identity. You have an identity, but when you compare it or you contrast it with everything else, it's not much. The interesting thing about that is if you do see that quality in yourself, it's an automatic. I say automatic because you have no say-so about it. Fundamentally, you don't have any say-so about anything. If you think you do, you're wrong. I love to say that. And the way in which you're wrong is not that you don't have some say-so. Sure we do. We can decide what to wear. We can decide what to buy. If we do go too far, we find out that we can't really decide where we're going to be born or who we're going to be born as or who we're going to be born to. Look at the amazing situation of when you're a little tiny person of 3 or 4 and looking at your parents and wondering, how did this, remember that? You actually wondered how this happened. There actually was a feeling in the little tiny person that maybe couldn't verbalize it. Quite often you hear the story of someone who feels like they had other parents. These couldn't have been my parents, these 2 guys. So the path of trying to understand what this desire, this craving for rightness, goodness, satisfaction, fruition, culmination, success, reward, perfection, how to be perfect, how to be perfect. How can we do that? How can we? And if we were perfect, what would that be like? We can have a lot of ideas and projections and imaginations about what that would be like. But as it says in the sutras, one of the sutras, picking and choosing is a disease of the mind. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have more ketchup and less mustard, that we can't do some of that, but human beings, our consciousness is so incredibly powerful and biased that we take it further than that. It even comes up to picking good people and bad people based on what? Hard to say there. You want to really watch out how much you're actually projecting on someone your own uninspected anger. This is something I've been talking about over the last series of talks I did called Meditation is Action. So if you take this person out into the world without finding out who you are, then you're actually going out there. It's very risky because anything that's been covered up successfully for 8, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, maybe your whole life, you go into that particular tsunami called humanity with all of its issues and problems and strife and challenges and bias and prejudice. I can go on and on. I don't need to. If you go in there and try to be active to do something based on your preconceptions, which is difficult because we see the actual, these people need help, this should happen, that shouldn't happen, I should march against this or go against that. Excuse me, and it's not that you shouldn't. But it might be a good idea to solve or at least settle this whole inner situation first. Find out who this is first. And when I say first, I'm not saying you can't go do stuff, do whatever you want to do. And I also say, I'm always telling people what I say, and that's what I'm doing now, saying stuff and then tell you I said it. Here it comes again. Oh, not that one again. Don't do anything unless you have to. Very simple, but think about that, reflect on that. If you're doing things you don't have to do, that you don't really have to do, then it's kind of like gambling or something. If you don't have to do that, don't do it. I even tell people if you don't have to meditate, go do something else. But if you're talking to me and you're talking about your issues, your problems, your worries, your anxiety, your whatever may come this way, I'm probably going to say, find out who you are. Let's take a close look at this. Don't put it under my microscope. Put it under your own microscope, telescope. Sit down and examine what this is. The only way you can examine something is to not push on it, not pull on it, and not shut down on it. Those are the three poisons: passion, aggression, ignorance. Shutting down. If you don't do that, then you're just kind of stuck with a damn thing, whatever it may be, your negativity, your depression for that matter, or your criticism because you're not perfect, yourself and always indicting yourself because you've been a bad guy. I know about those. That's how I'm able to talk about it, because I've been working with it for a long time. So if you're listening to me, as I've said before, you're giving me permission to talk to you for a few minutes. What you do with it, if something resonates, what I'm saying, then that might be of use to you. Maybe it won't resonate. I'm not here to particularly sell or promote or propagandize. But the whole idea of how to be perfect, how to actually end this cycle of suffering, of being imperfect, of having everything fall apart, of having, you're fine, you feel pretty good, and then part of your life crumbles. You lose a job, a relationship, or something like that. Instead of being able to relate to that, which is just part of life coming and going, with a sense of integrity, a sense of equanimity, and a sense of generosity, instead we start to clamp down and we fight and we challenge, and we've been wronged and something wasn't done right, and this kind of subtle form of blaming someone or blaming ourselves. What have I done? Here I've gone. I've done it again. I've joined this, moved on this. I could come up with lots of samples, as I'm sure you also can. So the how part of this is to first look at the what we call the imperfection, or look at the lies that we tell ourselves. Look at the way we deceive ourselves. You can't hardly walk from here to your car or here down the road to go for a walk without feeding yourself a line of some kind about everything. Our thought patterns quite often are about that. Instead of using the thought patterns as a tool to support our life, to support our family, our friends, our everything, our community, it's fundamentally support, which means not meddle with anyone, allow someone their neurosis. In order to respect someone's intelligence, you have to first respect their confusion. If you don't respect someone's confusion, you're not going to be able to work with them. And what I mean by respect is don't meddle with people. Don't correct anybody. Starting with yourself. Don't correct yourself. You start correcting yourself, and what happens is the self-centeredness, the ego that has not been seen to be unreal, will come in and join that, and we'll get a little credential out of your correction activity. A little credential of complimenting yourself around the corner. Well, I've done this, at least I'm doing this. How do I know? You know how I know. I'm the biggest fool in the room. Is there something wrong with the computer screen? Other than the person who's in it?
Imperfect.
Yeah, imperfect. What was that?
Just a scam.
Scam?
A scam.
So you corrected it?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Got that covered. That's how you'd be perfect. Get a perfect wife. So again, coming back to how, just to use this title from Sokuzan, first you have to look at the imperfection, and you have to look at it in such a way that you don't do any evaluation at all. You just look at the texture. The texture is like the nap on carpeting. In order to have texture, you have to have space. In order for whatever is giving the texture to have some kind of effect on whatever sense, whether it's a sense of touch, or the sense of seeing, or the sense of feeling. There's incredible texture that we are missing out on in our own consciousness just by terrifying ourselves. We start to have a negative feeling instead of seeing that as an opportunity to actually look at this mind that rises and falls full of negativity. Do nothing with it. As soon as you start to clamp down or change or drug yourself and try to find out a way to get out of the negativity, it's circular. You'll just be back at another day, another time, going through that negativity again. Pardon me. I need to take lessons from Bailey, who knows how to do that a lot quieter. You don't mind if I pick on you, do you? Then I would be perfect. I wouldn't make a loud snorting noise. So when I asked for a talk title, and Sokuzan suggested that, it triggers, over here it triggers just all the ways in which we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, comparing ourselves to how we were last week, how we were yesterday, how we felt 3 days ago. I felt so good a few days now. Now I feel like crap. From the point of view of realization, from the point of view of a clear awareness, those are not two separate things. You can't have one without the other. Until you see that contrast, which is like seeing, it's like seeing how magic works. You've been tricked, you've been tricked, you've been tricked, and you predict, and you've been tricked, and then it's, aha, that's how that's done. They're the same and they're different. They're the same and they're different. Without looking at your own negativity as it's arising, either on the cushion or in your everyday activity, what we call post-meditation. Spend time on the cushion, sharpening this awareness, get up off the cushion, and then notice that it's almost like the texture of your body, speech, mind, ideas, daydreams, and everything starts to become sharper. It's not made, there's more of a relief. It's called in sculpture. It's like what's called a bas-relief. It's flat, but it kind of stands out in places. It's the hollow spots around it make the form stand out. It's kind of like that. The texture of your life starts to show up in relief, texture. But it only can do that if you're not laminating it with your ideas and your pushing and your opinions about how it should be, what should have happened. If I can only get rid of that. If you have an experience, an emotion come up, and you even say in your mind's ear, there I go again. That's ignorance. That's actually, because what you're doing is as soon as you name something, you cover it up. You may think I'm saying don't name things. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying what? Be aware that you name things. Don't have to stop naming. But if you're aware that you're naming things, then you can see the naming. You can actually see what you're naming, and you can begin to go when it's appropriate. When we're talking about how to be perfect, you can see how you can actually go either behind the name or through the name, or see how the name and the object are not two separate things. Until you see that, the name is going to act as a cover-up. So if we were going to go to the fruition part of this short talk, say, how would you be perfect? How would you be in a position? How could your mental, your body, speech, mind, this whole construct, this whole sensorium that presents itself to our mind as me in my life, my clothes, my eyes, my nose, my ears, my room, my friends, my family, all those connections we have that we just take them for granted. And I don't mean to be negative about this, but they're going down. Some sooner than others. And when I say that, I don't mean to be negative. It's just what's going to happen. But here we are. We're completely alive. And we're present. And it's perfect. One of the schools of Tibetan Buddhism called the Nyingma have a teaching, and I'm not sure what the root of that is, called Dzogchen. It's also called the Great Perfection. It's because if you see what this is, but you have to see it, and it's something you never really, other than what I'm attempting to do here, you can't really share it with anyone. All you can do is say, keep looking at it, keep looking at it. And that's what I'm saying. If you look at your mind, sit down, hold still. You don't even have to call it meditation. Call it something else. Call it donuts. Sit down. What are you doing? Donuts. I've told people before, because sometimes people get hooked on the name, and I can't meditate. And I think, well, stop calling it that. Call it something else. Rename it. Names. Names are really powerful, just like you have a name that you got today, Shodo, Shining Path. Is that correct? You remember your name? You just got it. So that helps. It's not meant to interfere with your life. It's meant for you to. It's my response to you asking for more glue for Jukai, to receive these precepts so that you can go on your particular version of how this is done, because it's your awakening, your perfection, but you're completely, there isn't anything to correct anywhere. It's an astonishing realization. And if you see that yourself, and you're in a room of people that are constantly correcting and upset with themselves or upset with others, even if there's complete, utter, absolute proof, all evidence is partial. Every damn bit of evidence for anything is not the big picture. Even though, I'm not saying it isn't for 20 minutes, 20 days, 20 months. Sure, it works there, the relative truth works, and this is what our legal systems do. They come in and make use of that and try to materialize you and your life into some kind of controllable substance. And your spirit or your Buddha nature, if you've begun to realize that, you'll realize that you can't fight against anything. It can't be war. And I'm not saying you should roll over for anybody. If you understand what this is, then you will meet things where they're at with your awareness, with your intelligence, with your perception, and with as little bias and opinions as possible and preconceptions about who you're talking to or who you're dealing with. Questions? I have a lot more to say, but I'd like help. Yes?
The title of the talk is How to Be Perfect.
Yeah.
What's imperfect?
Well, perfect is it's a polar opposite of that. Imperfect is just a judgment of something based on whatever you see, your analysis. More. There's all kinds of room for questions there. I can keep talking. I just think the questions are good. David?
How does being perfect relate to skillful means?
Skillful means or upaya is the Sanskrit word for one of the Buddha's teachings. Skillful means where you actually function in a way that is skillful and you support someone's Buddha nature, support their basic sanity, and are in some way not interfering or meddling with them by trying to correct them based on your opinion that something needs correcting or is imperfect. To meet them where they're at. It's very difficult to do unless you've met this person, that person, where they're at. If you know who you are, if you know what this is, you've stopped correcting everything. That doesn't mean you're not aware of what's happening here. Someone who is aware can sit and at the kitchen table or on the golf course or on a park bench or on this cushion, anywhere, or stand or walk, and have powerful negative emotions go through, and they cannot find a self. They go through and they cannot find any Velcro anywhere. You can do this. Anyone listening to me, you're in this room, you can do this. It can be done. I'm not saying it's easy. Yes?
How can we use the duality of perfect and imperfect to help us
So just look at the selection, look at the way, anytime there's any kind of a judgment of anything, anybody, even if it's correct, even if somebody didn't, forgot to pick up their dog poop. I don't have a dog, so I know it wasn't me. No. Did you leave dog poop at our house? Huh. I'm using that as an example because that's something that it's kind of something it'd be easy to forget. Your dog is there and they go and you're talking to somebody else. I'm not picking on you at all. But that's the kind of thing that, you missed it. So that you have a case against that person as what? They're absent-minded. There's so many different things can go on. Look at all the causes and conditions that can arise. Like when the what's that red juice that spouted out in the kitchen? What was that? Well, yeah, the two consecutive salsa explosions in the kitchen were nobody's fault, were they? Was there anything imperfect about that? They were perfect explosions.
Perfect messes.
They were perfect messes. Yeah, and that's being a little funny, but actually it's true. You can't do anything about that. I mean, I'm saying you could, but things didn't come together in such a way that you could read the future of what was happening as far as temperature and so on, and the container and all of that. Who knows what happened? So you could say that, but then there's really nothing to correct there. Go ahead.
So let's use a more loaded example. When I got that blue car, that was a lemon, and you got kind of swindled.
You did get swindled.
Yeah, and so we went in there
and I killed that one guy. That one?
Yeah, I mean, it got really heated and escalated, and sort of needed to happen, but
Did need to happen.
I could have just said, well, I'll just keep this car. It's my karma or something.
You can't manipulate who you are. You have to be genuine, and that's why these precepts are not laws to be followed or rules. If you don't understand, then please ask questions, because the very reason there is a precept is so you can break it. I'm not kidding. You really need to look at this, what life and death is, and look at what telling the truth or lying, or really need to look at that. I got on this path because I'm extremely angry. That's when I started. That's how I got into this, because I didn't know what to do with it, and I couldn't trust psychiatrists. And I went to one, and I thought, I can't be here. This person is crazier than I am. So, like using the car dealer, being there and having that situation, and having them keep giving you a snow job. What did it take, about 4 hours there, 3 or 4 hours, over and over and over. And I think you and I blew up about the same time. We just waited and waited. Really patient, waiting in the waiting room. We'll just go along with it. Everything's cool. And then it's just like, there was no, we were both operating out of, I was anyway, and you probably were somewhere along that line. I'll just wait and see what happens. We'll just wait and see what happens. Well, what was happening is they kept it's like they're assholes. Yeah. Thank you. And it was terrible. I mean, if you'd have been there, and Unya was there, and it was just difficult. And she got upset and almost went into the other room at the same time I did. I went in there and gave him a piece of my mind. And I think you did it on the other end of the counter. I think we were both doing it at the same.
Opposite ends of the building.
Yeah.
Simultaneously.
At the same time, she was blowing up at them, and I was blowing up at them. I really got really upset about it. But it's not about not getting upset. It's not about never losing your temper. It's not about that. It's about being willing to be where you're at all the time. Whatever it is, that's where you need to be. It's called the great perfection. And if you fight with who you are, you will lose. If you fight with, as Byron Katie, the spontaneous realizer that teaches those four questions and their turnarounds. Pretty good way to use the intellect to confront the self-centeredness. I think nowadays, she's suggesting people meditate a lot more too, which is probably a good idea. Yes?
When you talk about there's no Velcro, there's nothing
Yes.
to stick to, and you have an emotional response
Yes.
to something, isn't that physical feeling Velcro? What is the...
Yeah, but it's your body. It's your body. It's a body. A body is going to feel things. And when just because there's no identity of a self who's having any kind of a position on the situation. I'm not saying that getting mad is particularly a sign there's some kind of ego functioning there. Yeah, that was affected my body. That's where I caught most of it, in my body. The ignorance and stubbornness and really, really very, very strong mistreatment of her. I did not like it. And that's why when some people say, well, think of me as a kind of a pacifist person, because I'm not a pacifist at all. Come and confront me. Not pacifist at all. I'm saying Meet things where they're not. I'm not advertising, making some kind of advertisement that everybody should be who they are, and if you feel this way, then do that. I don't mean that. I say find out who you are. You find out who you are, then it's the great perfection. Then, but you still have to deal with the crazy world, and how you deal with that needs to be with a sense of equanimity. This does not mean that you no longer have any negative feelings or bark loud words at someone. You may do it even more. The teaching person, he or she or they, who have understood what this is and have people come and listen to them, like is happening here, then that person is at the service of everyone that's there. They no longer have there's no credential for it. I mean, unless you call this one or being in a little seat. But there's no proof. Question?
From Kevin Townley in Brooklyn, New York.
Now, Kevin.
He asks, in regards to astrology, which can show us what area need our attention or areas where we might have potential, these can seem like opportunities for meeting personal perfection. When we don't make the most of these opportunities, is this imperfection?
No, and using astrology, and Kevin's bringing that up because he knows I'm an astrologer and I studied it since the 60s, and I actually use it to help me understand what dynamics different people that are students of mine are working with. Sometimes I do that and they don't even know I'm doing it because I'm not trying to be an astrologer, do astrology readings. The same thing with the Enneagram or any other structure. There's also the I Ching, which we were talking about earlier, the Book of Changes that is 10,000 years old. There's all kinds of devices or things that wise people in the past have put together and come up with ideas about how to look more closely at someone's cyclic movement, which is what astrology is, to look at, to reverse it around and look at the way someone functions, and then with the Enneagram, give them a certain number which categorizes them. It's somewhat helpful. And you could say, to try to respond to Kevin's question, I think it depends on the person. I think some people really need to maybe look at something like that, and that will be helpful. And another person, they don't need so much of that. What they need is solitary retreat, or what they need is to study the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, or they need to have more community, more connection with the community. Other people don't so much need the community, and they need to spend some time by themselves. And so this kind of a blanket teaching, one size fits all, is probably not going to work. It needs to be very, very individual. Just like some people should be doing tantric practices or creation completion practices, and other people need to be doing this particular practice. Some people, I think everyone should have some kind of an awareness practice, but I don't necessarily think they have to do exactly what I'm doing. In fact, and in fiction, if they come in here and sit and listen to what I'm saying and try this out and say, this doesn't work for me, I trust them. I'm not sitting back thinking, I must have not explained it right, or because I know this is really good, or it just doesn't function that way. I might, if I meet someone and I really like them and I like to talk to them and they're interesting and they leave, which this has happened quite a few times for whatever reasons, because of their karma, their life, the causes and conditions that arise in their consciousness. I might be sad, but I'm not here to correct them. I wish them well. So everyone is different. I hope, Kevin, if you have a further elaboration on that question, I'd address it. Further questions here? Bailey.
It seems like everyone is going to have different criteria for how they judge something as imperfect versus perfect. Where does that criteria come from?
More than likely, it comes from a lot of conditioning, preconceptions. The thing about conditioning is we don't really know we have it. We're not really clear until somebody or something kind of points it out or gives someone permission to help us with it. It's really difficult to see your own conditioning. You just think it's the truth. And if you think this is the truth and this is a lie, that's your conditioning. That's called, that's an ancient teaching, goes back before Buddhism in ancient India. Samvriti Satya is a fancy word for relative truth. Relative truth, the thing that identifies relative truth, is it's a lie. It's just a lie. It's a lie. It's a very clever lie, It's saying this is true and that's not true. Anytime you have that, it's called duality. The truth gets its truthiness, I know I stole that, truthiness from falsiness. You know, you can't have this without the other one. You have, just like War and Peace, very similar kind of thing. Yes?
How can we look at our own conditioning or criteria without trying to track it down to its root?
I think as long as you're practicing awareness practice, doing sitting meditation, then the root situation will start to show up for itself in your particular way, your style, the way in which you use passion, the way in which you use aggression, the way in which you shut down and use ignorance, in your particular karma, or everything that arises as, you could say, your personality, your style, and all of that. Then if you do a lot of awareness practice, then it's just a matter of sharpening the observer part of that consciousness, if there is such a thing as a part. Because the observer part is not a self. It's the part of the consciousness that we've talked about so many times. That is the ego or self-centered or me part. But the actual observer part is naturally objective or naturally not taking sides. But when that starts to resonate or vibrate, then there's an area, if you've not looked into it, then that hidden area starts to shut down or show up or turn away. And so it's just a matter, as far as tracking something to its root, that may be how it feels for you to actually do that. You may be sitting, it may happen there. You may notice in your interactions with others that suddenly there's some area of your consciousness that is starting to show up because of this. That it doesn't show up by way of I need to do something about this. It shows up by way of I want to see. I'm curious about this. The thing about someone who is clear, realize one of the things that's happening with them is they're very curious about everything. And I just gave a talk a while back about perceiving perception, which was the idea there was to encourage people to see, to kind of intercede there. You see, you're perceiving a color, mostly black in here, except for Raquel, has all the colors in the zodiac, and that's Circle of Animals, and that's not a criticism, by the way. You knew that. Okay, it's just perfect. Those are perfect pants. So when you're seeing something, to actually look, inspect, and sometimes I've used the idea, because I'm very visual and spatial, it's almost like there's someone looking at the perceiver and what's perceived. And if you can see how that works, you'll just see the perception. The perception only has no identity in it. It's just perception. It's an astonishing realization. And it's so astonishing that it's so obvious when you see it that you realize there's no way to tell anybody about it. Because you see this and you realize as they say, your hands are tied, because you don't have hands that can point at that. So then we revert to great teachers of the past, sages of the past, like Vasubandhu or Dogen, who know how to point to this using metaphors and using various other images and so on. Perception only. So when you see, to bring it down to a small construct, when you see something, hear something, smell something, taste, think something, there's the object, which is the sight or the sound or the thought. Then there's the imputed perceiver, or me, who's perceiving or thinking or feeling or hearing that. There you have duality. That's how duality works. It makes it look, and then this three-dimensional space we're in further corroborates that. And we do it so many different ways. And it seems to be necessary to look at the fundamental part of what is happening, which is just the perception, just the consciousness part. Not the perceiver guy or girl or them, or not what's being perceived, but just the perception itself. So do that. Questions are good if you have them, please. Yes, Bailey.
If I start to see my own conditioning,
Yes.
it can feel like I'm trapped by it.
Yeah.
I want to change it.
Yes.
How can I just observe it without wanting to try to change
That sounds like you're doing it. You couldn't describe it that way if you weren't looking right at all the different facets of the situation. You see the conditioning. You see that you're responding to some kind of a trigger device that's causing some kind of thing to arise, positive, negative, neutral, usually negative. And then there's that overriding me feeling that wants to stop that. So the idea there now is to see that there's an identity that is arising that is unreal. It's called the ego. You don't have to get rid of the ego. That's an illusion of trying to, then we turn our sights on the ego and try to find it and push it down, or get rid of the ego, or even try to see that it's unreal. It's circular. So awareness, it's always about awareness, about strengthening that so that eventually you start to see. It has a gradual aspect to it, but on the other hand, it's completely immediate. It's just this. It's just as it is. As it is lotus. Yes, sir.
If she sees the conditioning as hurting her relationships and hurting her ability to feel the things that she might want to feel, and it's driving her into negativity, to not do anything is like hurting other people and yourself. So how would you advise someone to utilize the awareness of seeing where the conditioning is coming from, seeing that you could potentially do something about it, to benefit others, is to not do something about it? I'm trying to form a question that is.
Oh, I'm watching. I'm listening. Please go ahead.
Is to not do something about it. Why wouldn't you want to do something about it?
Okay, so starting with that, it's not that we're not trying to shut down the wanting. We're not trying to be too self-centered about the whole thing. But it seems to be important to see that if you start to move out into a space in any direction without inspecting what that is, looking very closely at what that is, if there's a choice about it, then it seems to be cloudy. Big pictures, it tends to be cloudy. But if it's choiceless, then we're coming out of our lack of a position. And true compassion has no compassionator behind it. There's no solid being. If there's a solid being there, then there's some kind of something the person who's being compassionate is looking for. Not any outward kind of gift, but some kind of feeling of I'm being compassionate. So it's a very subtle area, and it needs, it doesn't need anything. You can do whatever you want. But from this old man's point of view, it seems to take a whole lot of looking at the person that keeps trying to get somewhere or be perfect or be compassionate. If you jump the gun and jump up off the cushion and go out into the world and start to work for others, then maybe that's what you should do. There's literally way more people doing that than there are people sitting down facing the wall. We got a few people that are actually going to train the fundamental nature of their mind, which is awareness. Who you are, when all these body minds die, who you are isn't going anywhere. And that's not a belief. You don't have to believe or disbelieve anything. You don't have to believe gravity. If you stop believing gravity, you can tell, oh, that person stopped believing in gravity. There they go. So the amazing thing about things that are universal, they're invisible. They're so incredibly part of the substrate of everything we are, the humanity, the everything, the billions and billions, countless numbers of insects, living, little tiny bitty little living beings everywhere that we quite often just kill. And I'm not saying you should kill or not. I'm saying it says don't kill, but what we have to do is we have to bring our mind to that situation so we can actually be responsible every single time. If we do kill, you need to be totally there. If we don't kill, you need to be totally there. You have to realize that things are being killed. You can't live without killing. You actually can't live with it. You might use your mind to say, well, I don't kill anything that has a mother, and I don't kill anything that has eyes. And I'm joking about this, of course, but I'm trying to say that life is life is life. So there's no, the cabbage plant is living. We eat them. We take something that's alive and we eat it. And it's part of this whole thing. This is not to validate or justify anything. And when it comes to something like the energy that is happening in terms of stepping into the milieu of the world without being really clear about who's doing the stepping seems to be dangerous and chancy as far as just getting swept up in this whirlwind of the relative truth that most people are fighting with and grasping at. So I say first, train your mind. Don't take your eye off any of that stuff like we talked about earlier. Keep your eye on it. Know what this is. Know what's happening in the world insofar as other people are tuning into things. You could tune in too. But then also hold still so that anytime you anytime you look at anything or see anyone who's in trouble or see, it's like, I don't know how this works, but it's not all completely conscious, like something you think about and it's like you know less and less and less and less and less about everything, and you might have a feeling of helplessness in front of the incredible vast suffering that's all over the world. Instead of meditating, you feel better and better and better. You actually feel not so good because you no longer have thick skin, and so therefore you're affected by everything. You're affected by every person, everyone you meet. Positive, negative, neutral, all kinds of things happening. And so, example I sometimes use, sometimes I will see someone on the street with a cardboard sign that says, "Hungry, please help me," and I can't wait to get to them. And I have no idea. I don't get any credit for it. I have no idea what it is. I just know I have to get to them and give them some money or do something. And there are other people I see that I just don't. And I'm not saying I'm psychic or know anything about it. I don't know what that is. But sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And I don't. The only reason I'm saying is I'm not confused about being confused. And you are. When I say you are, I'm not accusing you of anything other than being confused. You follow me? See my eyes get really big? Follow me? I'm saying when this old man has negativity, it's not a problem. It's not something I need to get rid of. And when I feel extremely good, it's not something I need to add to or celebrate or add on to. I'm doing so great because I feel so good. I'm just saying, don't miss your life. Don't shut down on anything. It's already perfect. Don't believe a word I say. But don't disbelieve it. That's another peculiar kind of belief. I don't believe that crap. I don't believe that old guy about jumping your, what are you driving? Probably a Mercedes. Give me your Mercedes. Don't do that. I don't want a car. I'm stretching that a little bit, but I'm trying to say that it's so easy, it's so tempting to just look at everything and break it down into pieces. So those people, and especially in our modern situation, it's so easy. I do it myself. That's how I know about it. I don't stop myself from doing it. I don't stop myself from yelling at the television.
Until we're really clear and until we really know who this is, how do we work with that?
Do a lot of sitting. Are you still sitting 3 hours a day? Keep doing that.
What I'm asking in a little bit more of a, like Bailey and then Jeremy's question, which is when we're in these relationships where it's
Yes.
intense,
Yeah.
and we maybe both people don't know who they are.
Yes.
They're trying.
Yes.
They don't, and they're hurting each other.
Yes.
How do you work with that?
Just insofar as you can, less is better. And by being there and being present, you're, as a meditator and as a Buddhist and also as someone who's sewing a robe to become a monk, you're more aware without even knowing. There's no credential there. I spent many years being more aware of the space I was in without having any credential at all. I didn't know what the hell to do with it. I couldn't convert what I was seeing into words. I still can't do it. But I just decided I have to talk anyway. So therefore, I'm just doing the best I can. But be there, it's more important. Forget me, forget everything else. But though you have two people next to you, or you're one of them, or however it may be, don't forget gravity. Be there in that space so that you can, because you're not separate from everything in the world. You're not separate from the insects in South America. Not to be believed or disbelieved or ignored. So just function. You already, I know you. All you have to do is just be yourself and be there. Sometimes that person is going to speed up and be full of bumblebees, and other times everything slows way down, and then everything just opens up, and there's just oxygen, and then it will go back up. Just watch it. Don't attempt to be somebody other. Be genuine. Be who you are. And that may require being pretty foolish at times. Be that way. I give you permission, as if you needed it. You don't need permission. You're a dragon. The dragons check in. Gee, what's that I do next? I'm not going to check in. And that's why the sitting practice, it stretches, I don't know how else to say it, stretches the awareness so that what comes into the awareness, your life, other people, people's ideas, opinions, the warfare in the world that's happening, it has a lot of room, and it can't find a solid entity who takes a position on anything. The only position you're taking as a Buddhist, as a Bodhisattva, be with all things. Be with all things. And that doesn't mean you're some kind of a pushover. It's not the opposite, but it's like there isn't anyone to be a pushover. You're with the energy that's happening there, and I don't mean to be romantic about it, but it's like you know how to handle clouds, you know how to handle wind, you know how to handle fire, you know how to handle earth. It's like you're a ruler with no kingdom. The kingdom is invisible. It's everywhere. There isn't anything. There's no limit to it. I sometimes say, look down. Go outside, look down. Okay, there's the dirt. Okay, now look up. You want to see a contrast? There's a big physical contrast right there. That goes on, as far as we know, forever. That stops right there. I hope I've made myself clear. More?
Yeah, well, I didn't get it.
Yep. You didn't get it?
No, I didn't get it.
Okay, I'll start over. So, well, it'd be different for you, though. You'd have to ask the question, because I wouldn't give you the same answer. That's why you didn't get it, probably.
Yeah, that makes more sense. You're answering to the individual first.
Yep. Insofar as there is one. I'm answering to someone who thinks they're an individual. That's what I'm answering to. Personality, character, all of that identity stuff wants something, wants perfection. And I'm telling you, I'm suggesting to you, I'm offering to you. It's already perfect. Nothing needs to be fixed, repaired, adjusted. It's already the case. But to realize that is you get grandfathered in, grandmothered in. When you realize you've always known this. You've known this before this lifetime. I woke in 1977. It was no big deal. I just realized nothing sleeps. I went on from there and went back into the factory and ground automotive valves. Took a while to talk about it. More, Jeremy?
Because
Yes.
just thinking of the situation she just said,
Yeah.
and taking it back to what Bailey said around.
Yes, please.
Yeah, around just, you realize that, you're in a situation, it's you and another person.
Yes.
And you can actually see
Yes.
a story formulating inside of your mind.
Yes.
See your own conditioning
Yes.
about to sabotage you.
Yes.
And you know that by acting upon that,
Okay.
that you're going to make the situation
Got it.
not what it could be.
Okay, what's your question?
So the question would be, do you do something right there and allow yourself to go, okay, this is conditioning. I'm going to take a moment, step back a minute, be the observer, watch this play out, not do anything about it, and allow that patience to allow something come in where there's more ability for there to be a collaboration, communication, and a positive outcome for both. So the question is that doing something? Is that doing something? And is that
Yes.
okay?
You have a question about it?
Yeah, is that okay?
No. More?
Yeah, more.
No, you more. Me less.
You're more.
You more, me less.
So it's not you more me. Okay. So it's not okay. Why is it not okay?
Because the particular analysis and elaboration and condensation and verification of various things, the way you're moving around, adds to the circularity. Its path is good. I mean, it's basically, but you're buying into relative truth as if something that's happening in your mind is fundamentally wrong or bad or would be meddling. So the labeling part, it's not that relatively in that space, it might have some effect, or it might be, shall we say, good or not meddling. It's the elaboration that causes the circularity. And what happens is you're separating yourself out. If you ask me, so you're getting it. You're separating yourself out as something separate from that could function in a different way, that could interact with that so-called separate person. You're not separate from that person. I rarely use this word, but I'm going to say it to you because you need to hear it. You need to surrender to that situation. Surrender. I know, find out. Find out. You're asking me, please find out. Your path in life is totally about helping others. I get that. We had a good interview, so I get that. But I'm saying, rather than try to be someone who is helpful, actually surrender into the very thing you're trying to work with, so you're not separate from it. And that way, you won't know if you're really helping. You won't know if you're helping or not.
What if I'm not judging that first option of where I see my conditioning?
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily judging. I'm going, wow, isn't that interesting? And it's going through.
Isn't that interesting is too much. Any comment on it? Is that interesting? It's like, there I go again. Any comment on anything, if you can, as a meditator, slowly it's called, even Dogen in the 13th century called it a backward step. And I think it was in Shobogenzo, I'm not sure, but backward step, and I say, back up 1/8 of an inch, to use just a little bit, back up a little bit and watch what's happening before you do anything. So if you back up, you can do it through someone's clothing, how they look, the tone of their voice, your own, the gravity pulling you down, things that you can't even think about because they're senses that don't think much. The sense of touch doesn't have much to say. It's the commentary about touch that has something. The mind comes in and says, you're feeling this, you're feeling hot, you're feeling cold, you're feeling good, you're not. And so what happens is not that that's incorrect. It has a correctness that is relatively based, that is going down. And it's called materialism. And when it's tied into the spiritual area or psychological area, then it's psychological materialism, which thinks some people are sane and some people aren't, and thinks some people are spiritual and some people aren't. There isn't anyone that isn't spiritual. Everyone is. Every human being, on some level, even animals, bugs, everything is headed for the truth. And so I would say, in that situation, take a little time out. It might be harder to do. I think it would depend on how much actual sitting practice you're doing, probably. We haven't talked a lot, but I sense your sincerity. Can't say any. I can't say so much about that. And you're extremely sincere about what you're doing. I don't doubt that at all. I'm just saying that you're loading it up with safeguards with a kind of a philosophical patina around everything you're doing. So it's not that you're not doing good. You are. Please continue to do that. Don't take this as some kind of message. You should stop doing what you're doing. You should continue, but open the doors, open the windows. have some kind of lack of security around what's happening, so that you don't chatter to yourself too much about, well, I'll do this, and I can see this, and I can see that, and I'm moving over here, now I'll move over here. Now there must be a more creative way, or must be, this just loads up and has a certain kind of relative accuracy, but we tend to get trapped, and we get seduced by that. We get seduced by that, and then we don't break loose from what's called the 8 worldly dharmas, or success and failure and right and wrong, and we get locked into that, and then we end up with a warfare of the world, which is arising in different areas all the time. So, spiritual path. This is spiritual path. There's no relative solution to this. There's the only direction is spirit, or Buddha nature, or seeing fundamentally. And the simplest way to put it, everything is dependently arisen. There's not a separate single being anywhere. If you realize this, then you're liberated. And what are you liberated from? I don't know. What do you think? Imperfection, perfection, polarity, right and wrong, up and down, waking and sleep, life and death. How about yes?
What did you mean when you said you woke up in 1977?
I was in a retreat, so it isn't actually a waking. It's like gradual. So I was in a month-long solitary retreat in the woods in the spring of '77, and after a couple of weeks of being there, I sat up and looked across a field out of the retreat hut that I was in, and words, they were not my words, there was like somebody else's words, but really nobody's words, just words came up out of something I understood, and the words were, nothing sleeps. That's the first thing that happened when I woke up, nothing sleeps. And there was no wonderful feeling of liberation or oneness, or it was just an insight that came up, and it's hasn't left.
What was the significance of that event in your path?
How are you asking?
I'm curious about the event or the experience. I've not heard you say that before.
Yeah. Well, I'm just, because I love to talk about myself, so I'm chattering away, and I'm saying, well, this is what happened to me, but actually I've not really had something happen, and I fell off a donkey. I've told you that story. 1967, I think it was, way before I started meditating, and that was some kind of an aha experience, but it went away. And the nothing sleeps kind of went away too, but then when I think about it, it's like, of course, I know that. I already know that, so I don't have to keep flashing out or remembering. I know it. And so it's not that you'll have that experience if you continue to meditate. You might have something, you could have a nutra samyak sambodhi where the top of your head blows off, and you could have some kind of aha experience that, suddenly you walk around and gravity doesn't matter anymore. And I'm being silly, but I'm saying you could have something totally different than what has happened here. It'd be with your kind of karma, your way of shutting down. It would show up as your way of waking up, just like you can't meditate away your karma, the tone of your voice, or your race, or your sex, or your anything else. You can't change something like that just by looking at it. You have to be genuine. Yes.
A couple questions.
Yes.
The first one from Sheldon.
Sheldon. Yes.
He asks, it seems like perfection fuels a lot of craziness. Perfectionists want it all the time. Others just give up because they can't have it. How is what you are talking about different than that?
Neither one. It's even Buddhism is characterized as the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. Like the sitar player, as the story goes, which I probably don't remember it exactly, but the sitar player was saying, asking the Buddha, how can I train my mind? And he said, well, what do you do with your sitar? How do you tune that? And he said, not too tight, not too loose. So it's like the middle way, not things go this way, go that way. Don't really take anything for granted either direction. So in the same way, people, it's not so much the negativity that arises as do we grasp at it by rejecting it, or we grasp at it by explaining it, or elaborating on it. The elaboration sometimes causes the circularity. And if you can just be with whatever, the simple way of putting it, whatever's arising, do nothing with it. Don't blame anyone, don't blame yourself, don't necessarily track it down. It's just that. It's everything you need to know is in that particular situation, rather than you got to go and find some kind of cause for it. Because as soon as you find that cause, then you need to know why that happened, and then you need to know why that. And it's not that that couldn't be helpful at times, but from the point of view of the general teaching that I am talking about here, from the point of view of sitting practice and bringing your clarity from your sitting practice into your life, is very simple. Sit down, hold still, see what is arising, and any of the six sense fields, including the mind. Don't push on it, don't pull on it, don't shut down, just sit here. And the longer you sit here, you will get probably bored. So the downside of boredom is obvious, it's boredom. But the upside is it's a sign you're giving up on the need for entertainment. The self-centered ego mind is constantly entertaining and filling itself with ideas and entertainment and wanting to be distracted by everything, wanting to be entertained. You have all these nerve endings in all of the senses, including the mind. We want to be, instead of having our senses abraded by something, we want feathers. We want something nice to happen in those, in our mind and our sense of touch.
A question from Sanho down in Austin, Texas.
Yes, Sanho.
Yes, is there a time to interpret or elaborate?
I would say a time to interpret or elaborate would come out of holding very still and doing nothing, and bringing yourself into any environment. Like what Jeremy was talking about, he's with a situation, and instead of doing the elaboration beforehand, to actually sit there and surrender. Another way of saying it is be helpless for as long as you can. Just be helpless and not know what to do. You're there's a dilemma, you can feel the strain, but just to not know, allows you to see, say if there's two people having a disagreement and you're there, rather than step in, just a not knowing, which is like space. Not know is a conceptual way of saying, who knows? Who knows is a conceptual way of saying, is there somebody that knows? So it's like we say quite often, well, who knows? It's kind of, we ask a question when we're really making a statement. So you could sit there and just allow yourself to kind of be a failure at that, so that then if you really give up to the space of it, and there's no guarantee, of course, but then what Sanho is asking about, is there time to elaborate or what was the other word? Interpret. Then that will come spontaneously out of the ground of the situation, rather than out of the surfacey opinions, ideas, and projections that may be coming out of your own uninspected consciousness, deep parts of your consciousness that have maybe not been examined. So less is better, less meddling, less elaboration, less, what was the other word?
Interpret.
Thank you, interpretation. Wasn't one of them memory? No. Okay. I need some of that. So, it's like, wait, don't jump in. If you'll notice, without even doing anything at all, if you spend a lot of time sitting, you'll tend to interfere less and less with anything that happens. You'll be more patient maybe, might be the word. More of a natural kind of willingness to just not know what to do about it. Maybe the ego situation, the ego mind, when that's operating, it just feels a little bit helpless or a little bit lost. Not such a bad thing. You can't discover anything if your mind is filled with ideas and concepts and opinions. You can't really extend your investigation if you're immediately blocked up by your ideas and opinions, constructs, or beliefs or disbeliefs. Sometimes when people believe something, that's as far as they go. And we even have conversations of, what do you believe about this or about that? You actually don't have to take any of those positions. Further questions? Very good, thank you.